Endo here with Baseball Outside the Box. Tip of the day. We've got another good one for you. Before I do that, I want to give a shout out to my good friend Eddie Diaz, five-time champion in 3 years, two in the Caribbean World Series, three in the Mexican Professional League. Can you imagine that? A manager that has 5 championships in 3 years. Unbelievable. He's currently now also the international scout for the Tampa Rays, and Tampa's doing outstanding. What a great organization. Heard a lot about Tampa. From Eddie Diaz, just an outstanding organization where you can tell how well they're doing, unbelievably, always at the top. They must have some pretty good development people, scouts, and obviously GMs, and putting all that together along with a great ownership. Also, I wanted to give a shout out to Eddie because he suggested, hey, Pete, you need to do the show, and he loves the tips, but be consistent with the time, possibly every morning. So I'm trying my best now to do a tip of the day every day or every other day in the morning. Be on YouTube, Facebook, all our social media. Any suggestions on or comments, anything you need to know or you want to recommend that I give certain tips on, love to hear from you. Peter Caliendo at att.net. Also, you can DM me on Twitter. You can get a hold of me easily. Google my name, Google baseballoutsidethebox.com. Go to baseballoutsidethebox.com. Join our podcast. That's a weekly show. We've got some top experts there. They're longer shows. They're about an hour. Just currently, if you want to learn about Cuban baseball, I mentioned it on the last show, go ahead and listen to this podcast. It is up with the director of coaches in Cuba with the Cuban Baseball Federation. It's an hour interview. It is a little broken English, but you'll get a very good idea of what they do and why they're so good in Cuba with only 60,000 players throughout the country, where we have over 26 million amateur players. But we've got some great coaches, great programs around the country. So a shout out to Eddie. I also want to give a shout out to my good friend Jeff Crushell with crushperformance.com. Check it out. Great podcast, human performance, development, athletic development. He's got some of the best people in those areas on his show. I listen to him all the time. He was inspirational when I listened to the last show. It's something I've talked about before, but when it comes from an expert, it really means a lot more. So shout out to Jeff for today's tip of the day, because I listen to his podcast, and I'm going to piggyback off his show and mention that, we've got to be careful. He had Jamie Reed with the Texas Rangers just recently on his show. We've got to really be careful as coaches, players, and parents throughout the game of baseball in 2 areas. One, in pitching, because we've got a lot of injuries at the older ages now. I know kids are getting Tommy John surgeries at 15, 16 years old, sometimes younger. That should not be happening. Why? Because, yes, players are throwing harder. We've got programs to speed up the arm. We've got programs to throw harder. And yes, throwing harder is no doubt important. Control is the name of the game. You got to be able to do both together. But at the same time, because we are throwing harder, we've got to be really careful, and we've got to build the right areas of our muscles to be able to slow down the arm properly and so forth. There's a lot of experts on this. You can check out, first of all, Alan Jaeger. Google his name, check him out. He's got great programs when it comes to warm-ups, when it comes to long toss. Also, our good friend, Ron Wolford with the Texas Baseball Ranch. Google him. Go to his website. Great ideas on what to do at the younger ages also to make sure that they're healthy. It's just not about throwing harder. It's a lot more than that. They will go into details with you. So our tip of the day is be cautious. Jamie Reed on Crusher's show mentioned your arm is like a tire thread. If you start early and then you're pitching way too much, those threads are going to wear down. Talk to your doctors. Visit usabaseball.com. Check out Dr. Andrews' program on what he talks about. There's nothing wrong with pitching. Just be careful how much. Coaches, parents, and players, be careful. The kids that are throwing harder at a particular age, be cautious, especially with them. When you're throwing harder than everybody else, you're apt to get more, possibly an injury sooner than everybody else. So be cautious there. Maintain your arm. If you take off for a couple months, you're not playing, make sure, as Alan Jaeger says, make sure you have a program, which he has, about 6 weeks, 8 weeks, to get back into throwing shape for your arm. Don't just go back on the mound and throw. Also, let's be cautious about our showcases. Showcases have a place in the game, to be able to showcase athletes. You don't have to go to all of them. If you pick 2 or 3 or maybe 2 a year that you'd like to, go to, it's kind of nice to go to a showcase for the experience also. But you've got to be ready. If you're going to pitch, if you're going to throw, make sure your arm's ready. Make sure your body's ready for that. If it's in the winter and you're in the north and you're not prepared, don't go to it. Go to a summer one. Be selective. I'm a proponent of Major League Baseball and the NCAA, blocking and not sending any of their scouts, any of their coaches in the winter to showcases. And let's just pick a particular time that's healthy for all our athletes. The other area is, depending where you live, and Chriselle talked about this on his show, on his podcast. Depending where you live, you're up north. For many years, we didn't play all year round. Now, we started practicing indoors, but we had to break the game down, and we did step-by-steps, worked on fundamentals. And you didn't see the injuries in the north as much. Now we're playing games a lot, and that gets to what we're talking about, when we're having kids specialize in the game. That's probably tip number 2, which we mentioned before, but I'd like to mention again because it's so important. When you're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, there's no need to play all year round baseball. It's actually detrimental. It will go against your body. It can hurt your body. You can get hurt long term because of it. Because you're not developing all your muscles, all your athletic ability. Play multiple sports. It shows the statistics. A lot of major league players, probably the majority of them, they didn't start to specialize till they were 14, 15, 16 years old. No need to specialize that young. I know Catherine Roberts, a yoga expert, golf expert, good friend, been on the podcast. She mentioned that, there's only one golfer at the top PGA level that was not a multi-sport athlete. And we think golfers are all single sport athletes since they were young. So be careful with the young kids, and then what? There's nothing wrong with taking a month or 2 off, do something else. Play another sport, condition, whatever you're going to do. Just have some fun, do something else. So that way you're not playing baseball all the time. So that is our tip of the day, or tips of the day. We hope you enjoyed them. Please share them. These are important issues. You got a question? Email me, petercaliendo@att.com, .net, petercaliendo@att.net, or you can DM me on Twitter, Baseball Out. I'm also at Better Baseball. You can Google me, send me a message, tell me if what tip you'd like to hear, something you'd like to hear about on the show, also on the podcast, either one. We love hearing from you. Spread the word, because these are important topics. We just barely talked about these 2 topics, why they're so important.